Shunned by her people, a blind alien woman finds love with a human who restores her sight.
The Seraphim believed themselves flawless. Their sleek, silver skin shimmered under the light of a distant star, and their crystalline eyes glimmered with intelligence so vast that it bordered on arrogance. Every child born among them was a symbol of perfection, an embodiment of their species' belief that nothing in the universe was beyond their control. Except, of course, for Liana. She was an anomaly, a mistake. Her blindness had been discovered mere hours after her birth. While other Seraphim infants stared into the world with wonder, their iridescent eyes drinking in every detail, Liana's gaze remained unfocused, cloudy. Her parents, renowned geneticists, had been mortified. They had tried to fix her, subjecting her to procedure after procedure, but the result was always the same: failure. By the time Liana was old enough to comprehend, she had learned what her condition meant. Among the Seraphim, perfection was not just a standard, it was a prerequisite for existence. Her blindness was not seen as a challenge to overcome or an opportunity to grow. It was a flaw, and flaws were unacceptable. So they exiled her. It was the logical thing to do, they said. A society of perfection could not sustain the burden of imperfection. Her parents, stoic and detached, had delivered the news themselves. She would be sent away to a distant colony of humans, a primitive species, barely worthy of notice, but at least capable of providing the resources necessary to keep her alive. "Be grateful," her father had said, his voice cold and clinical. "We're giving you a chance to survive." Many wouldn't. Liana's response had been silence. What was there to say? She had spent her entire life knowing this moment would come, yet the reality of it still stung like the lash of an unseen whip. She was Seraphim, yet she wasn't. She had no place among her own people, and now she was being cast into the unknown. The transport ship touched down on the human colony with a dull thud. Liana sat stiffly in her seat, gripping the edges of the armrests as if the force of her grip could anchor her to the life she was leaving behind. The air inside the ship was sterile, devoid of scent or warmth, a perfect reflection of Seraphim culture. She didn't know what to expect outside, but her imagination conjured images of chaos. Unruly humans, crude structures, and an overwhelming cacophony of sound. "Depart," the ship's automated voice intoned. It was the last thing she would hear in her native tongue. The ramp extended, and Liana stood. Her slender frame trembled as she took her first step toward the unknown. The air that hit her face was humid and heavy, carrying unfamiliar scents, dirt, oil, and something faintly metallic. Her bare feet met rough, uneven ground, a stark contrast to the smooth, polished surfaces of home. The sound came next. The low hum of machinery, the distant chatter of human voices, the occasional bark of an animal. It was a world alive with imperfections, and it overwhelmed her. She stumbled, her heightened senses struggling to make sense of the chaos. "Hey, are you all right?" The voice was rough, unpolished, and unmistakably human. Liana froze, unsure whether to respond. She turned her head slightly, her cloudy eyes searching for a presence she couldn't see. "Hold on, I gotcha," the voice said again, closer now. She felt a hand on her arm, warm, calloused, and steadying. "Who?" Her voice cracked. The Seraphim language was fluid, melodic, but the harsh human syllables felt foreign and clumsy on her tongue. "Name's Alex," the man replied. "Didn't expect to see a Seraphim out here. You, look like you could use some help." Alex was an engineer, though his title hardly did justice to the work he did. On the human frontier, where resources were scarce and technology often cobbled together from scraps, engineers were inventors, medics, and survivalists all rolled into one. He was used to solving problems with whatever he had on hand, but the sight of the alien woman before him left him momentarily at a loss. She was taller than him, her silver skin gleaming faintly even in the dim light of the colony. Her eyes, milky and unfocused, darted around aimlessly. She looked fragile, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself, as if daring the universe to see her as anything less than whole. "You're blind," Alex said, not unkindly after a moment. "Yes." Her voice was soft, hesitant. My people left me here. Figures, he muttered under his breath. Seraphim don't have much use for anyone who's not perfect. Huh. Liana didn't answer. She wasn't sure how to explain the complex web of logic and cruelty that defined her people. Instead, she allowed Alex to guide her, his steady hand on her arm, leading her away from the landing zone and into the heart of the colony. The colony was a patchwork of metal and stone, a sprawling testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. Liana could hear the hum of generators, the chatter of workers, and the occasional shout of a child playing in the streets. It was chaotic, but there was a warmth to it, a pulse of life that was entirely absent in Seraphim cities. Alex brought her to his workshop, a cluttered space filled with tools, machinery, and half-finished projects. The air smelled of oil and solder, sharp and acrid but oddly comforting. He guided her to a chair and handed her a cup of something warm. It's tea, he said. Drink it. You look like you need it. Liana hesitated before taking a sip. The liquid was bitter and unfamiliar, but it warmed her from the inside. For the first time in hours, she felt a small measure of comfort. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex shrugged, though she couldn't see it. Why not? You needed help. Besides, I'm curious. Never met a Seraphim before. I am not a good representation of my people. Good, Alex said with a grin. From what I've heard, they sound like jerks. To his surprise, Liana laughed, a quiet, trembling sound that was equal parts amusement and sorrow. That night, as she lay on a makeshift cot in Alex's workshop, Liana allowed herself a rare moment of hope. The world she had entered was strange and chaotic, but it was also alive in a way her own had never been. Perhaps, she thought, there was something to be found here, something her people had never given her. She didn't know it yet, but her journey was just beginning. Liana awoke to the unfamiliar hum of machinery and the scent of oil mingling with something metallic. It was nothing like the serene, sterile environment she had known on Seraphim vessels. The air felt thicker here, alive with a million subtle imperfections she was only beginning to notice. She opened her eyes, though it made no difference. Her world remained a blur of light and shadow, shapeless and unknowable. Still, the sounds around her provided a map of sorts. The distant whir of a cooling fan, the faint hiss of steam from a pressurized valve, and the steady, rhythmic tapping of fingers on a keyboard. You're awake, Alex said, his voice warm and unpolished, like the scrape of sandpaper across smooth metal. How are you feeling? Liana turned her head toward the sound. I'm not certain. Where am I? My workshop, Alex replied. You look like you could use a place to crash. Crash. She didn't understand the term, but she inferred its meaning. You brought me here? Yeah. He paused, and she could hear the scrape of a chair as he shifted closer. You were in bad shape. Figured you could use a hand. Her throat tightened. The Seraphim didn't help unless there was a logical reason to do so, an efficiency calculation that justified their effort. This man, a human, had no reason to assist her, yet here she was. Why? The words slipped out before she could stop it. Alex chuckled, the sound low and rich. Because you needed it, and because, well, you're interesting. Not every day you meet someone from a species that supposedly thinks they're better than us. His honesty startled her. The Seraphim prided themselves on their superiority, viewing humans as little more than primitive apes scratching at the edges of technology. Yet Alex didn't sound bitter, just curious. I'm not like them, she murmured. Yeah, Alex said gently. I figured that out pretty quick. The hours that followed were a blur of sensations for Liana. Alex introduced her to things she'd never encountered before. The gritty texture of human bread, the smoky tang of roasted vegetables, the fizzing burn of a carbonated drink. Each sensation was new, and though some were unpleasant, they were undeniably real. She listened intently as Alex spoke, his words weaving a tapestry of human life that was both strange and fascinating. He told her about the colony, a frontier settlement scraping by on ingenuity and stubborn determination. He spoke of the challenges they faced, scarce resources, unpredictable weather, and occasional raids by pirates or hostile alien species. But there was pride in his voice, too, a quiet resilience that resonated with her. "Why did your people come here?" Liana asked at one point. Alex scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Same reason humans do anything, I guess. We're curious. We want to see what's out there. And sometimes, we just need a place to start fresh." Start fresh. The phrase lingered in her mind. Was that what she was doing here? Or was she merely running from the shadow of her people's rejection? As the day wore on, Alex's curiosity turned toward her. "So," he began, "what's it like being, one of them?" Liana hesitated. How could she explain the Seraphim's cold, clinical perfection to someone like Alex, who radiated warmth and imperfection in equal measure? "It is," she searched for the words, "efficient, logical. My people value function above all else. And feelings? Where do those fit in? They don't." Her voice wavered slightly. "Emotions are seen as distractions. Weaknesses." Alex let out a low whistle. "No wonder they dropped you off here. You've got more emotion in one sentence than they probably show in a year." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You are not entirely wrong." As evening approached, Alex grew more animated, shifting the conversation to his work. He explained the myriad tools and machines scattered around his workshop, describing them with an enthusiasm that was almost contagious. Then he said something that made her sit up straighter. "I've been working on something that might help you," he said. "Help me?" "Yeah. It's an experimental neural optic interface. The idea is to stimulate the visual cortex and bypass damaged optic nerves or receptors. Basically, it could give sight to people who've lost it." Liana's breath caught. "You think it could work on me?" Alex hesitated. "I don't know. I've never tested it on someone with your physiology. But your anatomy isn't that different from ours, so maybe..." Hope stirred within her, a fragile, flickering thing that she barely dared to acknowledge. For her entire life, sight had been a concept as alien to her as she was to this colony. The idea of seeing, truly seeing, was almost too much to comprehend. "What would it require?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Well, a bit of trust for one thing," Alex said with a grin. "I'd have to tweak the interface to work with your brain. Might take a few days. And there's no guarantee it'll work. Could even hurt like hell." Liana considered his words. Trust. It was not a concept she was familiar with, but something about Alex's voice, his actions, made her want to believe him. "I will do it," she said finally. That night, as Alex worked on modifying his invention, Liana lay on the cot he had set up for her, listening to the rhythmic sounds of his tools. Her thoughts swirled with uncertainty and anticipation. Would she finally see the world that had always eluded her? Or would this, too, end in failure? She didn't know. But for the first time in her life, she was willing to take the risk. Liana felt the cold metal of the neural optic interface against her temple, its smooth surface a stark contrast to Alex's calloused hands as he gently secured it in place. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of machinery and the soft, steady cadence of Alex's breathing. The stillness was not comforting. It buzzed with anticipation, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "All right," Alex said, his voice a soothing counterpoint to her racing thoughts. "This might feel a little weird." Liana swallowed hard. Her fingers gripped the edge of the chair she sat in, her knuckles aching from the pressure. She had spent her entire life navigating the world through sound, touch, and intuition. What lay ahead was unknown and terrifying, but also exhilarating. "I am ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Good," Alex replied. He sounded confident, but she could hear the faint edge of anxiety in his tone. "Starting activation sequence now." A soft click echoed through the workshop as Alex pressed a button on the control panel. Instantly, Liana felt a surge of energy course through her skull, a tingling warmth that quickly turned to an electric buzz. The sensation was neither pleasant nor painful. It was alien, like 1,000 tiny fingers brushing against her mind. Then came the light. At first, it was nothing more than a burst of white, blinding and formless. Liana recoiled, her hands flying to her face, though she knew instinctively that the sensation wasn't physical. The interface was bypassing her eyes entirely, feeding raw data directly into her brain. "Easy," Alex said, his hand on her shoulder. "It's just the calibration phase. Give it a second." The light began to shift, breaking apart like ripples on water. Blobs of color appeared, blues, greens, yellows, all swirling together in a chaotic dance. Shapes emerged, undefined and hazy, as if she were peering through a frosted window. Her breath hitched. I see something." Alex let out a low laugh, equal parts relief and excitement. "That's a start. The system's still mapping your neural pathways. It'll take a bit for things to stabilize." The colors coalesced further, and the haze began to clear. For the first time in her life, Liana saw movement, edges, contrasts. She couldn't name the objects around her. Her mind struggled to assign meaning to what it was perceiving, but she could see. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and tears streamed down her cheeks unbidden. "I see," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I see." As the calibration continued, the world sharpened into focus. The vague outlines solidified into forms. The cluttered workbenches of Alex's workshop, the glint of metal tools catching the light, and finally, Alex himself. She turned to him, her newly constructed vision locking onto his face. His features were rugged and asymmetrical, his scruffy beard uneven and his nose slightly crooked, as if it had been broken once. His brown eyes were warm, alive with an emotion she didn't yet have words for. He wasn't perfect, not by Seraphim standards, but there was something deeply compelling about his imperfection. "You're human," she said, the word escaping her lips as if it were a revelation. Alex chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "Guilty as charged." "What did you expect? A tentacle monster?" Liana blinked, unsure if he was joking. "I do not know. I have never seen one of your kind before." "Well," he said with a grin, "now you have." Her gaze lingered on him, drinking in every detail. She had never realized how expressive faces could be. The subtle twitch of a smile, the slight crease of worry in his brow. It was mesmerizing. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of discovery. Liana explored the workshop with a newfound sense of wonder, her hands brushing against objects as her eyes took in their forms. She marveled at the sharp edges of tools, the tangled wires spilling out of half-assembled machines, and the flickering glow of monitors displaying streams of data. Alex watched her with a mixture of pride and amusement, occasionally stepping in to explain what she was looking at. "That's a plasma torch," he said at one point, gesturing to a sleek device. "Careful with that one. It's great for cutting metal, but it'll take your hand clean off if you're not careful." She tilted her head, studying the object. "It looks dangerous." "It is," Alex replied, his tone serious. "But in the right hands, it's a lifesaver." Liana nodded, her gaze drifting back to the torch. It struck her as a fitting metaphor for humanity itself. Dangerous, unpredictable, but also capable of incredible creation. Later, Alex led her outside into the heart of the colony. The transition from the dim, enclosed workshop to the open expanse of the outdoors was overwhelming. The sky stretched above her, impossibly vast and dotted with stars. The ground beneath her feet was uneven and rough, a mixture of dirt and stone. Lights flickered in the distance, marking the edges of the settlement. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Alex glanced at her. "This? Nah, this is just a backwater colony. You should see Earth. Now that's beautiful." She turned to him, her newly restored sight locking onto his face once more. "You do not see it as I do. This is the first world I have ever seen. To me, it is wondrous." His smile softened. "Guess it's all about perspective." As they walked, Liana took in the sights around her. She saw children playing with a battered ball, their laughter ringing through the air. She saw a woman tending to a small garden, her hands dirty, but her expression serene. She saw men and women working together to repair a broken generator, their movements coordinated and efficient despite the evident strain. Humanity was messy, chaotic, and far from perfect, but it was alive in a way the Seraphim never were. By the time they returned to the workshop, Liana was exhausted. Her mind was swimming with images and sensations. her thoughts a jumble of awe and gratitude. "Here," Alex said, handing her a steaming mug. "Tea. You've earned it." She took the mug, her fingers brushing against his briefly. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "For everything." He shrugged, though she could see the faint flush of color in his cheeks. "Don't mention it." As she sipped the tea, Liana felt a warmth that went beyond the liquid itself. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not as an anomaly or a burden, but as someone worth helping. And as she looked at Alex, she realized she wanted to know more about him, about humanity, about this imperfect, beautiful world she had only just begun to explore. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. The colony's calm was shattered by a sudden, resonant hum, a sound deep enough to vibrate through the bones, alien in its perfection. Liana froze mid-step, the wrench in her hand clattering to the floor. She didn't need her restored sight to recognize that sound. The Seraphim had come for her. Alex looked up from the half-disassembled generator he'd been working on, his grease-streaked face suddenly tense. "What the hell is that?" he asked, his tone sharp. Liana's fingers tightened around the edge of the workbench. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It is my people." The Seraphim ship descended with the grace of a falling leaf, its silver hull gleaming under the twin moons. It was unlike anything the human colonists had ever seen, sleek, seamless, and impossibly massive. The colony's defenses, such as they were, seemed laughable in comparison. A small crowd gathered, murmuring anxiously as the ship settled on the outskirts of the settlement. Alex and Liana stood near the front, the tension between them almost palpable. "You don't have to go to them," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "They're not your masters anymore." Liana turned to him, her silver skin catching the moonlight. Her newly restored eyes met his, and for a moment, she looked as though she might say something. But the ship's ramp extended with a hiss, and the moment was gone. A group of Seraphim descended, their movements fluid and precise. They were taller than the average human, their silvery skin shimmering faintly, and their crystalline eyes scanning the crowd with cold detachment. At their center was an emissary, his posture regal, his expression devoid of emotion. "Liana," he said, his voice like the hum of a finely tuned instrument. "You will come with us." The emissary's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The humans around Liana tensed, their instinct to protect her clashing with the primal fear that the Seraphim inspired. Alex stepped forward, his jaw set. "She's not going anywhere unless she wants to," he said, his voice steady but edged with defiance. The emissary turned his gaze to Alex, his crystalline eyes narrowing slightly. "A human," he said, the word dripping with disdain. "Do not presume to interfere in matters beyond your comprehension." Alex didn't flinch. "Try me." Liana stepped between them, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. She turned to the emissary, her expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" "To correct a mistake," the emissary replied. "Your exile was premature. We have decided that you may return to Seraphim society, provided you agree to certain conditions." Liana's stomach churned. She had spent her entire life being told she was a mistake, an anomaly. And now, suddenly, they wanted her back? "What conditions?" she asked warily. "You will undergo purification," the emissary said, his tone matter of fact. "Your association with these humans has corrupted you. We will erase the memories of your time here, and you will be reintegrated into society as a proper Seraphim." The crowd erupted in outrage. Liana heard angry shouts and muttered curses, but it was Alex's voice that cut through the noise. "That's not happening," he said, stepping closer to Liana. "She's not some tool you can reprogram whenever you feel like it." The emissary's gaze shifted back to Alex, cold and calculating. "This is not your concern, human." "She's my friend," Alex shot back. "That makes it my concern." "Friend." The word hit Liana like a jolt of electricity. The Seraphim had no concept of friendship. Relationships among her people were transactional, dictated by logic and necessity. But Alex's tone carried something deeper, something fierce and protective. It stirred something inside her, a feeling she didn't yet have the words for. "I will not go with you," she said, her voice stronger now. "My place is here." The emissary's expression didn't change, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. "Do you understand what you are saying, Liana? If you reject us, you reject the Seraphim entirely. There will be no return." Liana straightened her spine, her newly restored eyes meeting his unflinchingly. "I understand." The emissary stepped forward, his movements so smooth they seemed almost unnatural. "Do not let these humans fill your mind with foolishness," he said, his voice low. "They are imperfect, inefficient. They will corrupt you." Liana tilted her head slightly, studying him. For years, she had believed those words, believed that imperfection was a flaw, that inefficiency was weakness. But her time among the humans had shown her something different. Their imperfections made them adaptable. Their inefficiencies made them compassionate. "They are not perfect," she agreed, her voice steady. "But neither are we. We only pretend to be." The murmurs among the humans grew louder, emboldened by her words. The emissary's gaze darkened. "You would defy your own people for them?" he asked, gesturing disdainfully toward the crowd. "Yes," Liana said simply. The emissary's crystalline eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. He straightened, his voice rising to a sharp, metallic edge. "Then you leave us no choice. You are hereby declared a traitor to the Seraphim. We will not pursue you further. But know this, you are no longer one of us." The words should have stung, but instead, Liana felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was free. Alex stepped closer to her, his presence a steadying force. "You okay?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I think I am." The Seraphim emissary turned on his heel, his contingent following without a word. The ship's ramp retracted, and within moments the vessel was gone, leaving only silence in its wake. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but Alex stayed by Liana's side, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," he said after a moment. "If you wanted to go with them." "I did not," she interrupted. "I could not." Alex studied her, his brown eyes searching. "Why not?" She hesitated, the words catching in her throat. "Because here I am more than my flaws. Among my people I was a burden. But here," she met his gaze, her voice softening. "Here, I am seen." Alex's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed." Liana didn't reply, but as she stood beside him, staring at the empty sky where the Seraphim ship had been, she felt something she had never felt before. Belonging. The days after the Seraphim's departure were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The colony buzzed with a tense energy, its inhabitants torn between relief and apprehension. Though the Seraphim ship had left without firing a shot, its sheer size and ominous silence had left an indelible mark on everyone who had seen it. For Liana, however, the aftermath was something else entirely. The confrontation with her people had solidified her resolve, but it had also left her unmoored. For the first time in her life, she was truly free, free to make her own choices, to forge her own path. Yet freedom, she discovered, was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. And then there was Alex. The night after the Seraphim departed, Alex found Liana sitting on the roof of his workshop. She had climbed up there without a word, her newly restored eyes fixed on the stars above. The pale moonlight made her silver skin glow, giving her an almost ethereal quality. "Mind if I join you?" Alex called up. She turned, her expression unreadable. "If you wish." He climbed up easily, the metal creaking under his boots. Settling beside her, he leaned back on his hands and looked up at the stars. "So," he said after a moment, "you planning on brooding all night, or are you going to tell me what's on your mind?" Liana tilted her head, her gaze still fixed on the sky. "I am not brooding," she said, though there was a faint smile on her lips. "I am thinking about many things." She paused, her voice softening. "My people, this colony, you." Alex blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Yes." She turned to him, her crystalline eyes locking onto his. "You are An enigma to me, Alex. He laughed, a low, self-deprecating sound. Not sure anyone's called me that before. I do not understand you, she continued, her tone thoughtful. Humans are so different from the Seraphim. You are chaotic, imperfect, yet there is a strength in you that my people lack. Alex shrugged, trying to play off the compliment, but there was a softness in his expression. Guess that's just how we are. We screw up, we adapt, we keep going. It's messy, sure, but it works. It is more than that, Liana said, her voice barely above a whisper. You are more than that. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Alex glanced at her, his heart pounding in a way he didn't entirely understand. He opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, Liana stood. It is late, she said, her voice suddenly distant. We should rest. And with that, she climbed down, leaving Alex alone under the stars. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension between them, a growing awareness that neither of them seemed willing to acknowledge. Liana threw herself into helping the colony, her sharp mind and unique perspective proving invaluable in solving problems. She worked with the engineers to improve the colony's power grid, her insights into Seraphim technology giving them an edge they hadn't had before. Alex, meanwhile, busied himself with his usual projects, though his thoughts were never far from Liana. He couldn't shake the memory of her words on the roof, the way she had looked at him as if he were something extraordinary. But if either of them hoped the tension would resolve itself, they were soon proven wrong. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a group of colonists gathered in the central square to discuss the looming threat of the Seraphim. Though they had left peacefully, the memory of their ship lingered like a shadow over the settlement. They'll be back, one man said, his voice tight with fear. They don't just let things go. We don't know that, another argued. Maybe they've had enough of us. Enough of us? The first man snorted. We're nothing to them. They could wipe us out without breaking a sweat. Not if we're ready, Alex interjected. He stood near the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed over his chest. We've got brains, we've got guts, and we've got Liana. All eyes turned to her. Liana stood a few paces away, her silver skin gleaming in the twilight. She had been quiet during the discussion, but now she stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. My people are formidable, she said, her voice steady. Their technology is far beyond your own, but they are not invincible. They rely on precision, on predictability. You are unpredictable. That is your greatest strength. Her words seemed to embolden the colonists, but they also drew suspicion. One woman stepped forward, her expression wary. And how do we know you're not just leading them back here? The accusation stung, but Liana didn't flinch. If I wished to betray you, she said calmly, I would not have defied them in the first place. The woman hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. The tension eased, but Alex could see the hurt in Liana's eyes, even if she didn't show it. That night, Alex found her in the workshop, tinkering with a piece of Seraphim tech. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, but there was a tightness in her shoulders that betrayed her emotions. You okay? He asked. She didn't look up. I am fine. Liana stepped closer, his voice softening. You don't have to do this alone, you know. She paused, her hands stilling. I have always been alone. Well, not anymore, Alex said. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing a hand on her shoulder. You've got me. You got the colony. We're in this together. Liana turned to him, her eyes shining with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Why do you care so much, Alex? He opened his mouth to answer, but the words caught in his throat. Why did he care? Because she was brilliant and brave? Because she had stood up to her own people for him? For them? Because, against all odds, she had made him feel something he hadn't felt in years? Instead of answering, he did something impulsive. He leaned in and kissed her. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Liana froze, her mind racing, but then she melted into the kiss, her hands gripping the edges of his shirt as if anchoring herself to the moment. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, messy, imperfect, and utterly human. When they finally pulled apart, Alex looked at her, his face flushed. That's why, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Liana stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. "Humans," she murmured, shaking her head. "You are so strange." "Yeah," Alex said with a grin. "But you love it." She laughed, a sound that was equal parts joy and disbelief. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The air in the colony was tense, heavy with the weight of anticipation. The Seraphim had returned, or rather, their dreadnought had. It loomed in orbit, a silent, gleaming behemoth against the stars. Its presence cast a shadow over the settlement, both literal and metaphorical. Inside Alex's workshop, the tension was equally palpable. The small room was filled with people, engineers, technicians, and a few of the colony's de facto leaders. Liana stood at the center of the room, her silver skin catching the harsh glow of the overhead lights. All eyes were on her. "They will not attack immediately," she said, her voice calm and measured. "That is not their way. They will wait, observe, calculate the optimal way to achieve their goal." "And what's their goal?" asked one of the engineers, a burly man with grease-streaked hands. "To retrieve me," Liana replied, "or to ensure that I cannot aid you further." The room fell silent. The implications were clear. The Seraphim would stop at nothing to neutralize her, whether by capturing her or eliminating her entirely. Alex leaned against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. "So, we make sure neither of those things happens," he said, his tone resolute. "We fight." A murmur rippled through the room, a mix of agreement and unease. The Seraphim were a species of unparalleled technological prowess. How could a colony of scrappy humans hope to stand against them? As the meeting dispersed, Alex and Liana stayed behind in the workshop. The hum of machinery filled the space, a constant backdrop to their conversation. "You don't have to stay here, you know," Alex said, his voice low. "We could find a way to get you off-planet, somewhere they wouldn't find you." Liana turned to him, her crystalline eyes locking onto his. "And leave you all to face them alone? I will not. This isn't your fight, Liana. It is now," she said firmly. "Your people have given me a home, a purpose. I will not abandon them." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're as stubborn as the rest of us. You know that?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Perhaps I am learning from you." The next few days were a flurry of activity as the colony prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Liana worked tirelessly alongside Alex and the other engineers, using her knowledge of Seraphim technology to devise countermeasures. "We cannot outmatch them in raw power," she explained during one strategy session. "But their strength is also their weakness. They rely on precision and predictability. If we can disrupt their systems, introduce chaos into their calculations, we may stand a chance." Alex nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. "What about an EMP burst? Something to scramble their sensors?" Liana considered it. "It could work, but their systems will adapt quickly. We would need to follow it with something unexpected, something illogical." Alex grinned. "Well, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's being unpredictable." As the plan came together, the mood in the colony shifted. Fear gave way to determination, and the people rallied around Liana and Alex. Even those who had once viewed Liana with suspicion began to see her as an ally, a symbol of hope in the face of insurmountable odds. On the eve of the confrontation, Alex found Liana sitting alone outside the workshop, staring up at the stars. He joined her, lowering himself onto the rough ground. "Nervous?" he asked. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "My people are relentless. They will not stop until they achieve their goal." "But we've got something they don't," Alex said. "What is that?" He gestured to the colony around them. "Heart, grit, the willingness to fight for something we believe in." Liana tilted her head, studying him. "You truly believe that will be enough?" Alex smiled, his gaze steady. "It has to be." The Seraphim made their move at dawn. A beam of light shot down from the dreadnought, striking the colony's central square with pinpoint accuracy. It was not a weapon, but a projection, a holographic image of a Seraphim emissary. "You have had your warning." The image intoned, its voice resonating through the colony. "Surrender, Liana, or face annihilation." Alex and Liana stood at the forefront of the crowd, their faces set with determination. Alex stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're not surrendering anyone. If you want her, you'll have to come down here and take her." The holographic emissary's crystalline eyes narrowed. "So be it." The battle began moments later. Seraphim drones descended from the dreadnought, sleek and deadly, their movements eerily precise. The colony's defenses roared to life, a chaotic symphony of makeshift weaponry and ingenuity. Liana and Alex worked side by side, coordinating the counterattack. The EMP burst went off as planned, sending a wave of disruption through the Seraphim drones. Their movements faltered, their precision unraveling into disarray. "Now!" Liana shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The colonists unleashed their second wave, a barrage of projectiles and improvised explosives. The drones, unaccustomed to such unpredictable tactics, faltered further, their numbers thinning under the relentless assault. But the Seraphim were not so easily defeated. From the dreadnought, a new wave of drones descended. Larger, more advanced, their systems already adapting to the colony's tactics. The tide began to turn, and the colonists were forced to fall back. In the midst of the chaos, Liana made a decision. She turned to Alex, her eyes blazing with determination. "I need to go to the dreadnought." "What?" Alex stared at her as if she'd gone mad. "That's suicide. They will not stop until I am neutralized," she said. "If I can reach their central command, I may be able to disable their systems from within." Alex hesitated, his heart pounding. The thought of losing her was unbearable, but he knew she was right. "Then I'm coming with you." "No," her voice was firm. "Your place is here, with your people." "Liana, please, Alex." She reached out, her hand brushing against his. "Trust me." In the end, Alex let her go, his heart heavy with fear and hope. As she disappeared into the chaos, he turned back to the battle, rallying the colonists for one final stand. Liana's journey to the Seraphim dreadnought was harrowing, but her knowledge of their systems allowed her to evade detection. Once inside, she moved quickly, her every step a defiance of the perfection her people demanded. Reaching the central command, she accessed the ship's core systems, her fingers flying across the interface. It was a race against time. The Seraphim would soon discover her presence. As the ship's systems began to falter, Liana whispered a single word, her voice filled with resolve. "Enough!" Back on the surface, the drones suddenly froze, their movements jerky and disoriented. The colonists seized the opportunity, launching a final, coordinated assault that obliterated the remaining threat. As the dreadnought's engines powered down, a cheer erupted from the colony. The Seraphim had been defeated, at least for now. But Alex's joy was short-lived. His eyes scanned the sky, searching desperately for any sign of Liana. When she finally returned, battered but alive, he ran to her without hesitation. She looked up at him, her expression weary but triumphant. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it," she corrected. And for the first time in days, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, their victory hard-won and deeply cherished. The colony felt different in the days after the battle. The ever-present hum of machinery continued, the scent of oil and metal still thick in the air, but something intangible had shifted. The people moved with renewed purpose, their voices louder, their laughter heartier. For the first time in years, they had won, not just a battle, but the right to exist on their own terms. Liana sat on the edge of a platform overlooking the colony's central square, her silver skin catching the light of the rising sun. Her eyes, still adjusting to the neural optic interface, scanned the bustling scene below. People repaired damage to buildings, others worked to reinforce the colony's defenses, and children played, their joy uninhibited by the weight of the recent conflict. She smiled faintly. Humanity was resilient, chaotic, and beautiful in ways her own people would never understand. "You're up early." Alex's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him approaching, his gait relaxed but his face etched with a quiet weariness. His shirt was smeared with grease, and his hair stuck out at odd angles, but his smile was warm and familiar. I could not sleep, she admitted. There is much to think about. Alex nodded, lowering himself onto the platform beside her. Yeah, winning doesn't mean it's over. The Seraphim will be back, sooner or later. They will, Liana agreed. But perhaps not in the way you expect. Alex frowned, turning to her. What do you mean? Liana's gaze drifted to the horizon, her voice thoughtful. When I was aboard the dreadnought, I encountered something unexpected. A hesitation, a doubt. Doubt? Alex's brow furrowed. From them? Yes, she said. My people value precision and logic above all else, but they are not immune to fear. What happened here, what we did, it was illogical, unpredictable. It forced them to question the certainty of their superiority. Alex leaned back, crossing his arms. So you think they might back off? Not entirely, she said, shaking her head. But they may begin to reconsider their approach. The cracks are there, Alex. Small, but growing. He let out a low whistle. If anyone could get under their skin, it's you. She looked at him, her lips curving into a faint smile. I am not alone in that. The days turned into weeks, and the colony began to rebuild in earnest. The scars of the battle remained. Charred buildings, craters in the earth. But they were a testament to the colonists' strength rather than their vulnerability. Each repaired wall and restored structure was a symbol of their determination to endure. Liana became an integral part of the community. Her knowledge of Seraphim technology proved invaluable, but it was her unique perspective that endeared her to the colonists. She taught them what she knew of her people's tactics and systems, helping to fortify the colony against future threats. In return, they taught her about humanity's capacity for improvisation, creativity, and above all, connection. She learned to laugh, truly laugh, at their jokes, even the ones she didn't fully understand. She marveled at their celebrations, their ability to find joy even in the midst of hardship. And slowly, she began to see herself not as an outsider, but as one of them. One evening, the colony held a festival. It wasn't for any specific occasion. They simply wanted to celebrate being alive. The central square was strung with makeshift lights, their warm glow casting dancing shadows across the crowd. Tables were piled high with food, simple fare, but plentiful, and music filled the air, a lively rhythm that set people's feet moving. Liana stood at the edge of the square, watching as children ran in circles and adults swayed to the music. She had never seen anything like it. The Seraphim had no concept of such gatherings. Joy was an inefficiency, an indulgence. Yet here it was a vital force, as essential as air or water. Come on, Alex said, appearing at her side. He extended a hand toward her. What are you doing? She asked, eyeing his outstretched hand warily. Getting you to dance, he said with a grin. It's a human tradition. You'll love it. I do not know how, she protested. Neither do half the people here, Alex said, gesturing to the crowd. Doesn't stop them. She hesitated, but the warmth in his eyes was impossible to resist. Tentatively, she placed her hand in his, and he led her to the center of the square. At first, her movements were stiff, awkward. She stumbled over her own feet, her body unable to match the rhythm of the music. But Alex was patient, guiding her with gentle hands and an easy smile. Gradually, she began to relax, her steps growing more fluid, her movements more confident. By the time the song ended, she was laughing, a sound so genuine and unrestrained that it startled even her. Alex joined in, his laughter mingling with hers as they stood in the middle of the square, surrounded by the swirling crowd. I told you you'd love it, he said, his grin infectious. You were right, she admitted, still catching her breath. It is freeing. Just wait till the next song, he said, winking. It's even faster. As the festival continued, Liana found herself reflecting on how far she had come. The blind, abandoned outcast, she had been felt like a distant memory. Here, among these flawed, wonderful people, she had found a purpose, a home, and she had found Alex. Later that night, as the crowd began to disperse and the lights dimmed, Alex and Liana walked together to the outskirts of the colony. The sky was a tapestry of stars, their light shimmering like distant jewels. They stopped near a ridge, the ground sloping gently beneath their feet. I never thought I'd end up here, Liana said, her voice soft. Not just in this place, but with you. Alex turned to her, his gaze steady. I didn't think I'd end up here either. But I'm glad I did. She looked at him, her crystalline eyes reflecting the starlight. You have changed me, Alex, in ways I did not think possible. He smiled, his hand brushing against hers. You've changed me too. For a moment, they stood in silence, the vastness of the universe stretching out before them. Then, without hesitation, Liana leaned in and kissed him. It was a kiss filled with gratitude, hope, and a quiet promise of what was to come. When they pulled apart, Alex rested his forehead against hers, his voice barely above a whisper. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. Liana nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Together. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, they stood side by side, ready to face the challenges of a new day and a new future. Together.